Hello, welcome back, class. Today we're going to talk about summary, analysis, and argument. We're going to define those terms, and I'm also going to tell you how you're going to be using them this semester. So let's start with summary. So according to study.com, a summary is a condensed or shortened retelling of a longer work. It doesn't matter what the longer work is. What really is key here is that it's condensed. Summaries are intentionally short. The purpose is to communicate the basic ideas and any relevant details while leaving out anything that maybe isn't relevant. The ability to write effective summaries will not only take you far in college, but also enhance your memory and reporting skills on the job. So it's likely that you could be in a situation at some point where somebody says, hey, does anybody remember what this article or book or something like that is about? And if you have the ability to quickly go, yeah, let me give you a 30-second summary, that is a great skill to have. So let's talk about how to write summaries for college assignments. First of all, if you are asked to write specifically a summary, then one of the things that you want to make sure that you do is stick to the main points of the text itself. And you can do this by using text clues that refer to the moves of the author. So for example, you could say something like, the author begins with this, or then the author does, fill in the blank. And by doing this, it illustrates to your reader or your listener, whoever you're communicating with, that you are just relaying the information that the author gave and that you are relaying that information in sequential order, which is important. You also want to make sure that you're sticking to just summary. You want to leave out of it any statements about your opinion of the matter. So there shouldn't be any personal pronouns like, I thought that the author did a good job of da 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 da. You want to leave that information out. Instead of just sharing your opinion, just give the information that the author did. So by incorporating this analysis or argumentation, you're really veering away from what a strict summary is. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be times where your professor might ask you your opinion of something, and then if that's the case, you can give it alongside or after this summary. Okay, so we're going to talk about one particular type of summary called a synthesis, and you are actually going to get the opportunity to write a synthesis essay. So I want you to have lots of background information on what this particular type of summary looks like. So a synthesis is an essay that synthesizes or merges information from multiple sources. It relies on summary as its main component, but it is a little bit more challenging because you're not just summarizing different sources, but you're also explaining the connections among those sources to sort of add a framework to an essay. So basically, when you synthesize, you're not only pointing out the main points of an author's work, but you're explaining how those main points correlate to another work. By being able to synthesize, this influences your ability to sort of think critically because it allows you to practice perspective taking or seeing things from multiple angles. So what you're going to do when you write a synthesis is a couple of things. First, you're going to compare. You're going to look at the similarities among different sources and take notes as to what they have in common. You're going to contrast. This is the same thing but opposite. Look at the differences among these different sources and see how they are different from one another. You're going to consider this perspectives. Who wrote this particular source? Where was it published? How is it different? How is it a different perspective? So for example, say we're talking about an issue like immigration. An economic analyst is going to have a much different perspective on the issue of immigration than somebody who's looking at, education for second generation immigrants or something like that. So who is the person writing this particular source and what perspective are they coming from? You're also going to want to think about sequencing when you write your research synthesis. What particular sources have you chosen, and how do those sources interact with each other, and what order are you going to present those sources to your reader? And then the last thing that you always want to do when you write a synthesis is you want to manage parenthetical citations. Make sure that if you pull something from one of your sources, you always cite it. So a synthesis essay is going to look a lot like a summary, but it's going to include more frequent references to the sources, as well as transitions from source to source, so that you can see how all of your different sources speak to each other. Okay, let's talk about analysis. So analysis is defined as a detailed examination of the elements or structure of something. Essentially, when you create an analysis, what you are doing is you are looking at an object or an idea or a text, and you're looking at it very closely and breaking it apart into its different elements or its different parts, and then you're looking at the relationship among those parts. So in college, when your professor says analysis, usually what they mean is that you're going to look at a text and you're going to do some summarizing, but essentially what you're going to be doing is breaking that text apart and looking at its different elements and explaining how those elements work together to create something. So you're going to have an opportunity this semester to do a rhetorical analysis. So a rhetorical analysis looks at a text, either a written, verbal, or visual text, and looks at its rhetorical situation. So this semester we're going to listen to some speeches and you're going to get to analyze one. And what you're going to do is see if you can figure out the rhetoric behind this particular text. So you're going to look at, remember, rhetoric is either you convincing somebody of something or figuring out what somebody is trying to convince you of. So looking through that lens, you're going to look at who is the person or group responsible for sending this message. Who wrote this article? Who gave this speech? Who created this piece of art? You're also going to look at the person or group receiving the message. Who was it intended for? Why did this particular person speak to that particular group of people? You're going to look at the message that's being sent. You're going to look at the motivation for the message. Why this particular message at this particular time? And then you also want to look at things like the factors limiting or defining the situation in which the message is sent. So for example, if we're looking at a commencement address, right? That's a speech given at a graduation. There's going to be a particular situation in which that speech is given. And so there's things that are considered appropriate for that situation or not considered appropriate for that situation. And those would sort of be the constraints under which a particular speech is given. So when you do an analysis, you break down all of these sorts of elements into a cohesive essay explaining what all the different parts add up to. Okay, so we're going to talk about argument. An argument is a reason or set of reasons given with the aim of persuading others that either an action or an idea is right or wrong. So we're going to talk about arguments throughout this semester, but I really want you to understand what an argument is versus what it isn't. A lot of times when we hear that word, we think of a fight, and in terms of academia, that is not at all what an argument means. So an argument is a claim that is supported by reasons or evidence. So for example, you can't say that, the best flavor of ice cream is vanilla because that's subjective, right? But you could say something like the most popular flavor of ice cream is vanilla based on these reasons or evidence. So when an author tries to persuade a reader that something is true or correct by presenting reasons, or evidence, that is when you get an argument. And this is what makes an argument different than a statement. A lot of times we read things that are really statements and we think, oh, an argument is being made here. But if there's no reasons or no evidence giving, then no, it's not an argument. There are just some basic parts of an argument that I want you to be aware of. The first one is the issue. This is going to be the problem or controversy about which people disagree. So it doesn't matter what the argument is about. It does have to be disagreeable in some way. And so whatever it's about is the issue. The claim is going to be the position on the issue. So for example, vanilla is the most popular flavor of ice cream. That is going to be the claim. The support would be the reasons or evidence that the claim is reasonable and should be accepted. So for example, the ice cream store sold 112 containers of vanilla this week and only 29 of chocolate. And then the refutation or the opposing viewpoints. These are going to be the other side of the argument. Things like, well, but if you add up all the other flavors combined, vanilla was not the, most popular selling ice cream. So given the opportunity, more people will choose a flavor other than vanilla, something like that. So when you analyze an argument, you are essentially evaluating it. You are judging it, breaking it down into its elements or parts and saying, yes, this is a logical argument and it makes sense because of this, or no, this is not a logical argument and it doesn't make sense. You're looking at how all of the different parts work together. So summary, analysis, and argument are all tools that you will use in your college education, and they all really, go hand in hand together. There's different types of support that you can use to support an argument. You can use reason, a general statement that supports a claim. You can use evidence. These are things like facts, statistics, experiences, comparisons, and examples that show why a particular claim is valid. And you can also use emotional appeals. These are ideas that are targeted towards the needs or values that readers are likely to care about. So for example, if I'm making an argument about why, the government should provide free breakfast and lunch for all elementary school students, I might say something along the lines of, wouldn't you agree that we don't want any hungry children in our schools? That is an emotional appeal. It is me appealing to what I believe your values are going to be.